Right, we must apologize. We seem to be having some technical difficulty. We have every intention of taking you back to that all-important press conference, which is addressing the very sensitive but important national issue of brutality against journalists. We've already lost lives. Journalists have already lost their lives as a result of this growing canker. And there are some to whom the damage is irreparable. We've got Latif Idris, who today still lives with the consequences of a single question he asked a police officer on duty. These things must stop, and the GJA is taking the bull by the horns. We'll bring you details. First, this afternoon, we explored the ethical, moral, and societal implications of the death penalty. It remains in Ghana's law books, in spite of it not having been used in the last 30 years or so. Some want to still keep it, others want it removed. This afternoon, Amnesty International has issued a statement urging MPs to support a repeal of this law. Across the world, some elite countries continue to have it, and in some cases actually execute offenders. So these are some of the details from the statement. Amnesty International Ghana is appealing to all members of Parliament to vote in favor of the motion on the Criminal and Other Offences Amendment Bill and the Armed Forces Amendment Bill, seeking to abolish the death penalty in Ghana. More details from that statement shortly, a statement issued by Amnesty International, who are seeking to lobby members of Parliament to look at repealing the death penalty from Ghana's law books. Indeed, it has been decades since anyone was executed. But the death penalty does remain in our books, and many have been sentenced to death in the interim. We just haven't seen the sentences being carried out. So we do know that across Africa, there are several countries that have the death penalty. There are 55 nations in the African Union that have the death penalty. It's been abolished in 26 of them. Now, in 15 countries, a long-term moratorium has been applied on executions. That would include Ghana. But there are 15 countries in Africa that retain capital punishment. So it is indeed a ripe debate topic. Around the world, there are thousands of people in China who have been executed. It's probably the country with the highest number of executions. Between 2017 and 2022, thousands of people have been executed in China. Iran would be second. In that same period, 2017 to 2022, more than 576 people have been executed. Saudi Arabia is not far behind. They have killed 196 people through their legal system. Egypt has had 24 death penalties executed between 2017 and 2022. Interestingly, the United States, that has had the death penalty as part of its culture in many of the states, including the southern states, between 2017 and 2022, have executed 18 people. Singapore is behind them with 11. Iraq has also seen more than 11 executions. Kuwait has had 7. In Somalia, more than 6 people have been executed in that 5-year period between 2017 and 2022. And South Sudan is at the bottom of that particular league. They have had over 5 executions in those 5 years under study. Now, the Chief Justice, Gertrude Araba-Tokonu, was asked about her view on the matter during her vetting not so long ago. Let's recall what she had to say.
7 or 8 years in the Court of Appeal, came to the Supreme Court, and here I am. I've just moved on after working for some time.
So in other words, you have risen by merit, and there's nothing partisan in your career.
I would agree with that.
My lady, what is your view on death penalty? What's your view on that?
As a justice of the Supreme Court, I'm mindful of the fact that when cases come to court, if a case came to court, it would be my duty to preside over it. But on a personal level, I do think that the death penalty is too final, and it's something that I would be grateful if the legislative body can begin to look at it.
Lord, if I shot your daughter, it would be final, wouldn't it?
It would be, but you see, in criminal law, we are always looking at the mens rea, not just the actus reus.
Is that not the essence of a trial? That you take all the necessary evidence and circumstances and everything you want to consideration versus the law and come to a conclusion that I shot your daughter, intended to kill her, and I did kill her, and therefore I'm guilty of murder. Would not that be how you would come to?
With all due respect, order 69. Mr. Chairman,
You're sharing about people saying we are quarreling. But I control the proceedings. If you want to bring anything to my things, you know what to do. You don't, no, not by speaking into the mic. Can we please hold on? My Lord, I was asking that if...
Kindly use another example, not my daughter.
You see, Mr. Chairman, exactly.
That's exactly the point.
You shot Madam X.
Well, Lord, if I use Madam X, the emotional response will be different. So he who feels it knows it. So when we are arguing about death penalty being final and so on, it is when the shoe is on the other side. See that using your daughter as an example gives a different feeling. That's all the point I want us to draw. I know
You've done a good job.
I'm very strong about that.
An eye for an eye.
All right, now let's explore this debate a bit further. Genevieve Partington is with Amnesty International. She joins us over the phone right now. Genevieve, thank you for your time. I mean, this is an age-old debate. The suggestion is that the death penalty, there's no coming back from it. There's no, once a person is sentenced to death, there's no remedial justice beyond that. But here in Ghana, it hasn't been carried out in decades. Is it really a matter of urgency that this law be repealed?
Thank you for having me. And yes, it needs to be repealed. Can you hear me?
We can hear you. There is a bit of a break in the line, but we can hear you. Please proceed. Right. It seems we are having some technical difficulty in hearing Genevieve Partington, who is with Amnesty International. She's seeking to break down their reason for pursuing repealing of from Ghana's law books. Genevieve, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
Wonderful. Please continue.
So I was saying it's yes, it's urgent to repeal it because it, first of all, it doesn't serve as a deterrent to crime. And we are also, I mean, it's been in our statute books for a very long time. It came historically with, British common law, when, they used to administer a lot of death penalty back then. And now, even the UK doesn't use it. So I think we need to relook at things and take it out. Yes, people are not being executed, but persons are still being sentenced to death. And why should it stay in the books if we are not using it? So I think it's time for it to make its grand exit that we are praying that Parliament will vote for very soon.
Is the fairly logical rationale for calling for the law to be repealed. What I haven't yet heard is the urgency. Where's the ticking clock? Why is it important for this to be done now?
Well, it's important for it to be done now, basically, because no president in power can guarantee that they will not execute anyone that is sentenced to death. That is one. Yes, we are moratorium, we are abolitionists in practice. However, it's a ticking time bomb. Anybody can come into power and decide, well, we are going to execute so and so. So why keep it in our books? And the fact that Parliament is debating on it now makes it urgent. The fact that it's been placed on the table, and the fact that there are so many key stakeholders, key decision makers that support it, faith-based organizations like the Catholic Bishops' Conference. You have Reverend Lawrence Tete, Archbishop Duncan Williams just issued a statement just a few days ago to support it. Ghana Armed Forces supports it. Even the Office of the President, Office of Chief Justice. So if all these people are pushing for it, then definitely there's a matter of urgency and we need to get it passed now.
In practical terms, what would happen to all of those who are currently on death row if this law is repealed and they can no longer be executed? What happens to their sentences?
So great, that's a very good question. So first, with the law, if this law is passed, what happens is that normally it only applies to those that get sentenced after the law is passed. However, the president has the death sentences to life imprisonment. So after it is passed and the president signs that the law can be passed, then the president himself has to commute those sentences. So it has to be retrospective. The law has to be retrospective for those who are currently serving time in jail. And they will serve life imprisonment. That is what has been suggested.
Now, although you've shared an impressive list of institutions that support the repealing of this law, there are still, especially the far right, Christian groups, who believe that Jesus Christ said an eye for an eye. In the justice system, is there no space for an eye for an eye? Since, the idea is that the punishment should be commensurate to the crime. For those who feel they have been deprived of loved ones by certain murderers and so forth, is there no space for an eye in those instances?
No, because first of all, an eye for an eye is from the Old Testament of the Bible. I don't know any extreme right Christians in Ghana per se, but what happens is most families actually do not believe an eye for an eye. They rather prefer life imprisonment for for most of these persons that commit murder. They're actually not interested in death penalty. Also, we have to understand most of the people within the condemned cells are persons who have actually not had, some of them have not had fair trials. Let's also understand that a lot of them come from very poor backgrounds. They do not understand most of the law, even how they got there. Yes, they killed someone, but were things explained to them properly? So we have to factor all those things in. And based on that, having, quite a number of unfair trials. And that is no fault of the judiciary system. It's just, unfortunately, that is how our system currently is. So based on that, it's very difficult to actually put people on death row, because they haven't got a fair chance to defend themselves. Some people are also wrongly convicted. We have to think of, there's a small percentage of people that are wrongly convicted. So what about those who are wrongly convicted? What if they are executed? Then what happens to them? So we have to think about those things. I think it comes from more of a human rights perspective, that people have to look at these things than an emotional perspective. And, I kill because someone killed. And that is actually contradictory to what we believe in society. If we are telling people not to murder and the state is also going to murder, I think that's very contradictory to our beliefs. So that is why it is urgent. It's urgent because it's in Parliament now, so it needs to be voted, in favor of the motion to abolish.
Right. Now, you and your colleagues at Amnesty International have obviously had this debate over and over again. The questions I'm asking you are questions that you've answered on various fora in the past and continue to do so. So forgive me for playing devil's advocate. It's for the benefit of our audience. I want them to see how Amnesty International has arrived at the very solid stance that you are upholding and defending today. So forgive these questions, but I am very curious about this. You've talked about these institutions that are all for the abolition of this law, but there are those who might argue that these institutions calling for the abolition actually goes against the base nature of the average Ghanaian. It is the same average Ghanaian who, when people are caught stealing, would beat them up, put rubber tires around their necks, and completely illegally burn them to death. It happens here in this country. So would it not be a suggestion that the people themselves, left to their own devices, would consider death to be an appropriate punishment for certain crimes?
Because if you look at it, those who are being punished and burned to death and lynched, unfortunately, are those that are committing the petty crimes, and not those that commit murder. Those that commit murder are immediately, sent to jail, and then they get their time and trial. So far, I've not heard of any person that has committed a murder that has been lynched. It's mostly petty crimes. So I don't think that would be a great comparison.
Just to assist with the record, 2 people last week were lynched in the Asin area. 2 people who attempted to murder an elderly lady, cut her up with cutlasses. And as they were leaving the scene, allegedly, they were set upon by members of the community who burnt them to death in front of the police. This happened just last week. It was reported on Adum FM. So that's at least one example, isn't it?
Yes, it's one out of so many examples. It's just one. So we can't use one to validate why the death penalty needs to be abolished. So again, with Amnesty, we look at the countries that have abolished. Overall, it's about 112 countries that have abolished the death penalty. Our neighbors have abolished the death penalty. So it's something that we need to look at and also abolish. Even the International Criminal Court and the Rwanda court do not use death penalty for terrorists and persons that commit genocide. They use other forms of punishment. So why would Ghana continue to use the death penalty? There are so many other examples. Currently, we have 176 prisoners on death row. I can see that you are playing the videos. Their conditions are extremely deplorable. Again, but we are all human. If we want the prison to serve as a place of not just punishment, it also has to be a place of reform. The prison place, both are first-time offenders. They committed the murder. Have we looked at their whether they are mentally challenged? Have we looked at what do you call it? Even the background, as I said, of the persons being convicted of murder, and then even sometimes the classification of murder. Some have been there due to domestic violence cases and so on. So I think this is something that we need to look at critically. I know the Office of the Chief Justice and Attorney General as well, they are looking at it so that there's a better classification of murder charges, and also to swiftly change this death penalty to life imprisonment. There are so many statistics out there. Ghana, we've done a public opinion poll, and apparently most Ghanaians actually do not want the death penalty. So it's contrary to what others are actually saying. So this is something that we really need to look at. And Parliament needs to see the urgency to pass this law. There's no more sitting on it. It's something that is urgent.
Genevieve, thank you, Genevieve. This has been delightful. We appreciate your time with us, and we'll certainly keep an eye on proceedings in Parliament as this particular bill is considered. Genevieve Partington represents Amnesty International. Right, we've been doing our own poll on Twitter. The simple question was asked: do you think the death penalty should be repealed? And just as Genevieve suggested, so far, out of 359 votes, 54% are saying yes, it should be repealed. 46% are saying no, it should not be repealed. We'll keep an eye on that. It's some 4 hours into that particular poll. And so far, the yeses, the ayes have it. Let's see if Parliament follows suit.